They fired me to save $90,000 a year and lost $320 million because of it. But the worst part? I knew exactly when it would happen, and I said nothing. My name is James Anderson, and for 12 years I was the man companies trusted to keep them out of trouble. I'm 47 years old, 6'1", lean from years of routine discipline I picked up back when I served in the Navy as a systems engineer. Short brown hair, starting to gray at the temples, and the kind of calm expression people mistake for indifference. It isn't indifference. It's control. When you've spent your life studying what goes wrong before others even see it coming, you learn to stay quiet and watch. At Helios Energy Solutions in Houston, a mid-sized energy technology firm balancing innovation with strict federal oversight, I was the head of compliance. Not the most glamorous title, but the most important one when things went sideways. That Tuesday morning started like any other, until Ethan Cole walked in. Ethan was 34, tall and sharply dressed in a tailored Navy suit that probably cost more than most engineers made in a month. Perfect hair, perfect smile, the kind that never reached his eyes. He moved like a man who had never truly been challenged, confident, smooth, dangerous in a way people didn't immediately recognize. He was our new CEO. What most people didn't know, but I did, was that Ethan had quietly exited his previous company after a failed restructuring that cost investors millions. No scandal, no headlines, just a clean, well-managed disappearance. Now he was here, and he was smiling. The conference room was packed. Department heads, senior managers, even a few junior analysts invited to observe leadership in action. I sat near the end of the table, notebook open, pen resting calmly in my hand. Ethan didn't shake hands. He nodded at people like they were already on his payroll and replaceable. "Let's talk about efficiency," he said, pacing slowly. "We're carrying legacy structures that don't serve a modern, agile company." Then he clicked to the first slide. Operational streamlining, Phase 1. I didn't need to see the rest, but I watched anyway. Across the table sat Mark Delgado, my closest colleague, mid-40s, slightly overweight, always in rolled-up sleeves, the kind of guy who stayed late not because he had to, but because he cared. His dark eyes met mine for a split second. He knew, or at least he felt it. Ethan kept talking. Buzzwords, metrics, savings projections. The room shifted from curiosity to quiet tension. Then he said it. "Compliance as it currently exists in this company is an outdated cost center." A few people shifted uncomfortably. Others nodded. I didn't move. "Manual oversight, redundant checks, excessive documentation," Ethan continued. "We're replacing it with automated systems, AI-driven compliance monitoring, faster, cheaper, scalable." He paused, smiled. "And we'll begin by eliminating the current department structure." There it was, clean, simple, fatal. Mark leaned slightly toward me. "James, this is bad," he whispered. I didn't answer, because I already knew something Mark didn't. This wasn't just a bad decision, it was a catastrophic one. Ethan moved on, highlighting projected savings, numbers that looked impressive on paper but ignored one critical truth. Compliance wasn't a department, it was a legal anchor. Remove it incorrectly, and the entire structure loses its validity. But Ethan didn't know that, or worse, he didn't care. Around the room, a few people actually started clapping. Clapping. For a decision that would eventually destroy everything they were sitting in. I slowly closed my notebook. Not out of frustration, out of clarity. Because in that moment, I realized something important. They weren't going to stop this. No one in that room was going to ask the right question. No one was going to check the legal dependencies. No one was going to notice the ticking clock that had just started. So I did what I've always done best. I stayed quiet, and I watched. The email came 4 days after the meeting, short, formal, bloodless. "James Anderson, your role has been restructured to Senior Administrative Coordinator, effective immediately." I read it once, then again. No anger, no surprise, just confirmation. I sat in my office, smaller now, reassigned to a quiet corner on the third floor, staring at the city skyline of Houston through tinted glass. The same skyline I'd spent over a decade protecting from invisible risks no one else bothered to understand. Demoted, but not removed. That detail mattered. The first thing I did wasn't pack my belongings. I opened my computer, and I started copying everything. Every compliance file, every audit trail, every regulatory submission tied to my name. 12 years of documentation, organized, time-stamped, cross-referenced like a military archive. That discipline didn't come from corporate life. It came from the Navy. Back then, missing a detail could cost lives. Here, it would cost companies. As I worked, I noticed something strange. My access hadn't been fully revoked, not even close. That's when I walked down to IT. Ryan Patel sat behind the service desk, a 29-year-old systems analyst, slim build, slightly hunched posture, always in a wrinkled button-down shirt like he'd slept in it. Brilliant with systems, terrible with confrontation. The kind of guy who avoided eye contact unless absolutely necessary. "Ryan," I said calmly, "just confirming my access is still active across compliance systems." He blinked, clearly uncomfortable. Yeah, I mean, the ticket said downgrade, not revoke. I assumed, well, they didn't specify." Of course they didn't. Ethan's version of efficiency didn't include details. I nodded. "Understood, thanks." Ryan hesitated. "Should I change it?" I looked at him for a second, then shook my head. "No, leave it as is." He looked relieved. That told me everything I needed to know. Back upstairs, I kept digging, and that's when I found it. Not in a hidden folder, not buried deep, just sitting there, unnoticed. The official compliance registry. My name, still listed as the primary legal authority. Active, valid, untouched. I leaned back in my chair, slow breath in, slow breath out. Then I opened the company's business continuity plan, section 14.2. I knew it by heart, but I read it anyway. Any change in designated compliance authority must be formally reassigned within 30 calendar days by board resolution. Failure to comply results in automatic invalidation of compliance status, retroactive to the vacancy date. I closed the document. That was it. That was the crack in the foundation. And no one had even noticed it was there. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table across from my daughter, Emily Anderson, 18 years old, tall like me but with her mother's sharp green eyes. Long brown hair usually tied back in a loose ponytail. Focused. Determined. The kind of person who triple checks everything, not because she has to, but because she understands what's at stake. She had acceptance letters spread out in front of her. College, law, big future. "Dad," she said softly, "you're quieter than usual." I smiled faintly. "Just work." She studied me for a moment. "Something's wrong." I picked up one of her papers, scanning the fine print. "See this?" I pointed. "Scholarship conditions, line 3. She leaned in. "Minimum GPA requirement." "And the clause below it?" She paused. Then her eyes widened slightly. "Oh, if I drop below it even once, I lose everything." I nodded. "Details matter, Emily, not the big headlines, the small lines nobody reads." She looked at me differently after that, like she understood something deeper. The next morning, I walked into the legal department. Quiet, controlled, routine. That's where I saw Laura Chen. Mid-30s, precise posture, always in tailored suits, glasses that framed sharp, observant eyes. She was one of the few people in this building who actually read things thoroughly. She looked up as I passed. "James," she said carefully. "Quick question." I stopped. "There's a gap in the compliance transition records. It doesn't look complete." There it was, the only person who noticed. I met her gaze. "Then someone should probably look into that." She held my eyes for a second longer than necessary, then nodded slowly. But she didn't say anything else, didn't escalate, didn't push. Because people like Laura understood something most didn't. Seeing a problem and acting on it are two very different things. Back in my office, I closed the last folder. Everything backed up, everything secured, everything exactly where it needed to be. I didn't feel victorious. I felt prepared. Because the most dangerous failures aren't loud. They're silent. They build slowly, hidden in assumptions, ignored in fine print. And by the time anyone notices, it's already too late. I submitted my resignation on a Thursday morning. No speech, no explanation. Just a clean, 2-paragraph email sent at exactly 8:12 a.m. Effective in 14 days, I will be stepping down from my position at Helios Energy Solutions. That was it. 12 years reduced to 2 sentences. HR responded within the hour. Sandra Miller, early 50s, short blonde hair always styled perfectly, the kind of woman who built her career on policy and procedure but avoided conflict at all costs. Polite, efficient, predictable. She called me into her office that afternoon. "James, we're sorry to see you go," she said with a rehearsed smile. "We'll begin standard offboarding procedures." I nodded. No exit interview, no pushback, no questions. That told me everything. They didn't understand what they were losing. Over the next 2 weeks, I did exactly what was required, and nothing more. No documentation transfer, no internal briefings, no warnings. I showed up on time, completed assigned tasks, closed my laptop at 5 p.m. every day. To everyone else, it looked like professionalism. In reality, it was precision. Because there's a difference between leaving responsibly and leaving correctly. On my final day, my system access was terminated at 4:03 p.m. Late, sloppy, typical. Ryan from IT sent a quick message. "Hey, sorry, ticket came in late. You're all set now." I replied with a simple, "Thanks." No bitterness, no sarcasm, just closure. As I walked out of the building, I didn't look back, because I already knew something they didn't. This wasn't the end. It was the start of a countdown. The following Monday, Helios was running like nothing had changed. Emails sent, deals moving forward, leadership meetings filled with optimism about leaner operations. Ethan appeared on an industry podcast talking about innovation and efficiency. The company looked stronger than ever. On the surface. Underneath, a clock had started ticking. 30 days. That was all they had. And no one had even started counting. At home, things were quieter. Emily sat across from me at the kitchen table, her laptop open, tuition numbers glowing on the screen. "Dad," she said carefully, "I've been running the numbers again. It's tight." She wasn't panicking. That wasn't her. But I could hear the concern beneath the calm. I leaned back, studying her. "You trust me?" I asked. She hesitated, just for a second, then nodded. "I do." "Good," I said, "because sometimes the best decisions don't look safe. Until later." She didn't fully understand, but she accepted it. That was enough. 3 days later, I signed the lease. A small office space on the edge of downtown Houston. Nothing impressive. 2 desks, 1 glass window, a coffee machine that sounded like it was dying every time it turned on. But it was mine. Anderson Compliance Consulting. The name looked simple on the door, but it carried weight, experience, history, authority. I registered the business that same afternoon. By evening, my professional profile was updated. Former head of compliance, now independent consultant specializing in regulatory risk and recovery. I didn't advertise. I didn't need to. Because in this industry, problems always find their way to people who know how to solve them. The first call came faster than I expected. David Reynolds, early 40s, deep voice, sharp tone, partner at a mid-sized law firm specializing in corporate litigation. Clean cut, always in dark suits, the kind of man who spoke in short, decisive sentences. "Mr. Anderson," he said, "I've been reviewing your background. We have a client facing a potential compliance audit, and we need someone who knows how to handle risk before it becomes public." I leaned back in my chair. "How urgent?" 2 weeks. I smiled slightly. "Then you called the right person." While Helios moved forward, confident and unaware, I was already moving on. Building something new, something stronger, and somewhere in the background, quiet, unnoticed, unstoppable. The clock kept ticking. 2 weeks after I left Helios, the company announced its first major contract under Ethan's leadership. a $48 million partnership with a renewable infrastructure firm out of Arizona. It made headlines. Helios enters new era of efficiency and growth. I read the article from my small office, coffee in hand, the morning light cutting across the desk. Ethan's face was everywhere, confident, controlled, celebrated. Ethan Cole had quickly become the poster child of transformation. He appeared on business panels, podcasts, even a regional news segment where he spoke about cutting through outdated bureaucracy to unlock real innovation. Same navy suit, same perfect smile, same blind spot. Because while contracts were being signed and deals were expanding, so was something else, something invisible. Every single day, Helios operated without a properly reassigned compliance officer. They were in violation, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly accumulating risk. 30 days passed, then 35, then 40. No internal audits, no compliance verification, nothing. Because no one thought to check the one place that mattered most, the legal authority behind the system. From my office, I tracked everything, not obsessively, not emotionally, just methodically. Every public filing, every press release, every contract announcement, patterns, timelines, exposure. It was like watching a structural crack slowly widen under pressure. You don't need to touch it to know what's coming. You just need to understand how it fails. The second contract was even bigger, a multi-state energy grid integration deal, over $90 million. That's when I knew. They weren't slowing down, they were accelerating. Meanwhile, my own calendar was filling up. Word spreads quickly in industries built on risk, especially when someone with a reputation for precision suddenly becomes available. The calls came in waves. Law firms, mid-sized corporations, even a few government-adjacent contractors. Most were cautious, some were desperate. All of them needed the same thing: clarity before crisis. One case stood out. Angela Brooks, 42, operations director at a logistics energy firm in Dallas. Medium height, athletic build, sharp jawline, always dressed in practical business attire. She had the kind of no-nonsense personality that came from years of cleaning up other people's mistakes. Her voice over the phone was direct. "We missed a compliance filing deadline," she said. "Audits in 3 weeks. If we fail, we're looking at 7-figure penalties." I didn't hesitate. "I'll be there tomorrow." When I arrived, the situation was worse than she described. Missing documentation, incomplete records, no clear audit trail. But unlike Helios, Angela listened. Every recommendation I gave, she implemented immediately. No ego, no shortcuts, just execution. For 10 straight days, we rebuilt their entire compliance structure, line by line, document by document. When the auditors came, everything was ready, clean, defensible, solid. They passed. No penalties, no escalation. Crisis avoided. Before I left, Angela shook my hand firmly. "You saved us," she said. I shook my head slightly. "No, you just chose to listen." That's the difference most people don't understand. It's not about knowing the rules. It's about respecting them. Back in Houston, I checked Helios again. Day 52. Still no replacement. Still no correction. Still no awareness. Then something unexpected happened. An email landed in my inbox. From a familiar name. Daniel Ruiz, late 30s, former compliance analyst on my old team. Quiet, observant, always slightly overlooked despite being one of the sharpest people in the room. Lean build, tired eyes, the kind of guy who noticed things others didn't. Subject line: "Something's wrong." I opened it. "James, I don't know if I should even be sending this, but no one's listening. There's no official compliance sign-off on recent filings. I checked. Your name is still on everything. I brought it up twice, got shut down both times." I read it slowly, then once more. He knew, at least part of it. I didn't reply immediately, because warnings only matter when people are willing to hear them. And Helios? They had already made it clear. They weren't listening anymore. The announcement dropped at exactly 9 a.m. Helios Energy Solutions had secured a $320 million acquisition deal with a West Coast investment group. It spread fast. business media, industry newsletters, financial blogs. Helios becomes one of the fastest-growing energy firms in the region. I read it from the same chair in my office, the hum of the coffee machine filling the silence. They were celebrating. They had no idea. Ethan Cole was everywhere. Front-page interviews, video panels, quotes about bold leadership and cutting legacy inefficiencies. He looked sharper than ever, tailored suits, confident posture, the voice of someone who believed he had already won. And to everyone watching from the outside, he had. Because numbers don't lie, unless they're built on something that's already broken. Internally, Helios moved fast. Deadlines were compressed. Legal reviews were accelerated. Teams were working late, pushing to finalize the deal within 3 weeks. Speed had become their advantage, and their weakness. Day 63. That's where they were now. 33 days past the compliance deadline. Every document submitted, every certification signed, every regulatory statement made. Invalid. But no one saw it, because no one was looking in the right place. That afternoon, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. "James Anderson?" a calm voice asked. "This is Michael Turner." Early 50s, as I later learned, portfolio manager at a private investment firm based in San Francisco. Tall, composed, silver hair, the kind of man who built his career on asking questions others avoided. "I've been reviewing Helios Energy," he continued. "Something about their compliance structure doesn't add up." I didn't respond immediately, just listened. "They've moved too fast," he added, "and I can't find a clear transition in their regulatory filings." Smart man. "What exactly are you asking?" I said. "A second opinion," quietly. I leaned back in my chair. "You're already asking the right questions," I replied. "That's more than most." He paused, then said, "That's not an answer." "No," I said calmly. "It's a warning." At home, things felt different. Emily walked in that evening holding an envelope. Her eyes gave it away before she even spoke. "I got it," she said, trying to stay composed. "Full scholarship, law school track, everything covered." I stood up slowly, taking the letter from her hands. She'd earned it. Every late night, every detail she double-checked, every line she refused to overlook. I smiled. "Looks like you read the fine print," I said. She laughed softly. "I learned from the best." For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to relief. Back at the office, my inbox kept growing. Consulting offers, retainers, long-term advisory roles. People weren't just looking for help anymore. They were looking for certainty. And in a world built on assumptions, certainty was expensive. One message stood out. Subject line, Strategic Advisory Opportunity. The sender was Lena Foster, late 40s, executive recruiter for high-level corporate consulting roles. Polished, direct, known for placing specialists into crisis situations where failure wasn't an option. "We're representing a client looking for senior compliance leadership," she wrote. "Your background has been highly recommended." I read it twice. Didn't respond. Not yet. Because timing matters. And I knew something they didn't. Helios was approaching its final stage. Press releases were already drafted. Celebrations quietly planned. Leadership bonuses likely calculated. Everything aligned. Everything ready. Everything fragile. I checked the date. Day 68. Still no compliance officer. Still no correction. Still no awareness. And somewhere in a boardroom across the city, they were shaking hands on a deal they didn't legally have the authority to complete. I didn't intervene, didn't warn, didn't step in. Because some lessons only make sense when they cost something. The due diligence team arrived on a Monday morning. Sharp, efficient, unemotional. Exactly the kind of people who don't miss things. They came from Westbridge Capital, the investment group behind the $320 million acquisition. 10 analysts, 2 legal advisors, and 1 lead auditor who didn't say much, but watched everything. Her name was Rachel Kim, late 20s, slim build, straight black hair tied into a low ponytail. No unnecessary movement, no wasted words. The kind of person who double-checks numbers not because she doubts them, but because she trusts patterns more than people. She didn't look intimidating. That's what made her dangerous. The first 2 days went smoothly. Financials checked out. Operational reports were clean. Presentations were polished. Ethan delivered everything with confidence, walking the team through charts and projections like a man already closing the deal. Because in his mind, he already had. Rachel didn't speak much during meetings. She listened, took notes, asked small questions, the kind most people brushed off. Who signs off on your compliance filings? Where is the transition documentation? Who holds legal authority on current certifications? Simple, direct, ignored. On the third day, she went quiet. That's when things started to change. Instead of sitting in conference rooms, Rachel moved into the records department. Hours passed, then more. No one paid attention, because no one expected the problem to be there. She found it at 3:17 p.m. A digital record, clean, official, undisturbed. Primary Compliance Authority, James Anderson. Status, active. No replacement filed. No transition completed. Rachel didn't react immediately. She cross-checked, pulled federal registry data, compared timestamps, reviewed internal documentation. Every step confirmed the same thing. The system hadn't changed, not legally, not officially, not at all. By 5 p.m. she requested a private meeting. Ethan, legal, senior leadership. The room was smaller this time. No presentations, no applause, just silence. Rachel sat across the table, folder in front of her. Calm, controlled, certain. Can someone explain why James Anderson is still listed as your primary compliance authority? She asked. Ethan frowned. That's outdated, he said quickly. We restructured months ago. Rachel didn't blink. Where is the official reassignment? Silence. Thomas Grant, head of legal, mid-50s, heavy-set, gray beard, usually confident but now visibly uneasy, flipped through his files. We assumed the transition was processed internally. Rachel shook her head slightly. That's not how federal compliance works. She opened the folder, laid out the documents. Clear, undeniable. There has been no formal reassignment, she continued, which means your compliance authority has been invalid for, she checked her notes, 68 days. The number hit the room like a shockwave. Ethan leaned forward. That's not possible. Rachel met his eyes. It is, she continued, voice steady. Every regulatory filing submitted during this period is legally invalid. No one spoke. Every certification, every compliance statement carries no legal authority. Thomas swallowed hard. What does that mean for the deal? Rachel didn't hesitate. It means your company has been operating under a false compliance status for over 2 months. Ethan's confidence cracked. For the first time since he walked into Helios, he looked unsure. We can fix this, he said quickly. We'll reassign, update everything. No, Rachel said, firm, final. You cannot retroactively fix compliance violations. The room shifted. Tension turned into something heavier. Fear. Behind Ethan, 2 board members exchanged glances. One leaned toward the other, whispering sharply. Doubt had entered the room. And once it's there, it spreads fast. What are the consequences? Someone asked quietly. Rachel didn't soften it. Legal exposure, financial penalties, invalid disclosures during acquisition discussions. She paused, then added, and potential misrepresentation. That word landed hardest. Misrepresentation. Not a mistake, not an oversight, a liability. Ethan leaned back slowly, running a hand through his hair. For the first time, he wasn't in control. And somewhere across the city, I already knew exactly what they had just discovered. The deal didn't fall apart slowly. It collapsed in a single morning. At 8:40 a.m., Westbridge Capital issued an official statement. Due to unresolved compliance irregularities and material misrepresentation risks, we are terminating all acquisition proceedings with Helios Energy Solutions, effective immediately. No negotiation, no delay, just over. By 9:15 a.m., the news hit every major financial outlet. Headlines spread like wildfire. $320 million energy deal collapses over compliance failure. Helios under investigation for regulatory misrepresentation. The story wasn't just about a failed deal anymore. It was about trust. And once trust breaks, it doesn't recover. Inside Helios, chaos replaced confidence. Emergency meetings were called. Executives rushed between conference rooms. Phones rang non-stop. Emails flooded inboxes. No one had a clear answer, because no one had ever prepared for this scenario. By noon, the board stepped in, and everything changed. Charles Whitman, 62, chairman of the board, tall, silver-haired, with the presence of someone who had spent decades controlling outcomes, sat at the head of the emergency meeting. He wasn't loud, didn't need to be. When he spoke, the room listened. "This situation," he said slowly, "is a direct failure of executive oversight." His eyes landed on Ethan. Not angry, worse, disappointed. Ethan looked different now. Same suit, same face, but the confidence was gone, replaced by something tight, desperate. "We can fix this," he said again. "We bring James back. We correct the filings. We—" "No," Charles cut him off, flat, final. "You should have thought of that before you removed the one system holding this company together." By 2 p.m., the internal investigation began. By 3:30 p.m., the legal risks were outlined. And by 5 p.m., the decision was made. Charles Whitman resigned as interim CEO, effective immediately. Public statement. Personal reasons. Private reality. Containment. Ethan Cole didn't get a statement. He got a meeting. It lasted 12 minutes. No negotiation. No second chance. Just a formal request for resignation. Effective immediately. He walked out of Helios that evening the same way I had weeks before. But unlike me, he looked back. The market reacted the next morning, and it was brutal. Helios stock dropped 18% at open, then 27%. By closing bell, down 41%. Investors pulled out. Partners paused contracts. Confidence evaporated. Across departments, layoffs began. Not announced, not explained, just emails, security escorts, boxes. Daniel Ruiz was one of the first to message me. "They're cutting entire teams," he wrote. "People who had nothing to do with this." I stared at the message for a long moment, then closed it. Because this was always how it ended. Not with precision, but with fallout. That evening I was at home when Emily walked in holding her phone. She looked different. Not worried, not confused, focused. "Dad," she said quietly, "you need to see this." She handed me the screen, an article, front page, my name, not as the story, but as the missing piece. Former compliance head still listed during critical failure. She looked up at me. "You knew, didn't you?" I met her eyes. Didn't lie. Enough to understand what would happen. She sat down slowly, processing, not judging, just understanding, the way she always did. "I used to think mistakes were loud," she said. "They're not," I replied. "They're quiet, until they're not." Outside, the city moved on like nothing had happened. Traffic, lights, noise. But inside Helios, everything had already changed. The call came 3 days after Helios collapsed. I recognized the voice immediately. Calm, precise, controlled. "James, this is Rachel Kim." No introduction needed. "I'm calling on behalf of Westbridge Capital," she continued. "We're restructuring our acquisition strategy, and we need someone to lead compliance across multiple targets." I didn't respond right away. Not because I was surprised, but because I wanted to hear how she framed it. "We're offering full operational authority," she added. "System design, oversight, implementation. Your terms." That got my attention. Not the money, the control. 2 days later, I met her in person. Rachel looked exactly the same. Sharp posture, minimal expression, eyes that measured everything. But this time, there was something different. Respect. Across from her sat Jonathan Pierce, early 50s, partner at Westbridge. Tall, broad-shouldered, salt and pepper beard, the kind of man who built billion-dollar deals but knew when to step back and let specialists do their work. "We don't want to repeat Helios," he said simply. "You won't," I replied. The contract was finalized within a week. Long-term, high-value, complete autonomy. No layers of approval, no interference, just results. I didn't celebrate, didn't announce it, didn't post about it. Because real wins don't need attention. They speak for themselves. The work started immediately. 3 companies, different states, different regulatory environments. Same problem. Weak compliance foundations hidden behind strong financials. I rebuilt everything from the ground up. Processes, authority structures, verification systems. Nothing complicated, just correct. At home, I handed Emily a folder. Inside, every tuition payment, covered, paid in full. She looked at me, stunned. "You didn't have to?" "Yes," I said calmly. "I did." She smiled, not surprised, just proud. A week later, I stood in front of a classroom. Guest lecturer, University of Houston, compliance and risk management. 30 students. Most of them didn't even know what compliance really meant yet. I looked around the room. Young faces, sharp minds, future mistakes waiting to happen. "My name is James Anderson," I said, "and I'm here to teach you how not to destroy a company without even realizing it." A few nervous laughs. Good. They were listening. Midway through the lecture, I paused. "Let me ask you something," I said. "How many of you read every clause in a contract before signing it?" A few hands. Not enough. I nodded. That's where it starts. That night, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I opened the message. Ethan Cole. Short. Direct. "James, I'd like to talk. I think I misunderstood some things. Would appreciate your perspective." I read it once. Then again. There was a time when that message would have meant something. A chance to explain, to correct, to guide. But that time had passed. I didn't reply, didn't block him, didn't acknowledge it. I just let it sit there, unread, unanswered, irrelevant. Because some lessons don't come from advice, they come from consequences. Months later, the results spoke for themselves. 3 companies stabilized, 0 violations, stronger systems, higher valuations. Westbridge expanded operations, and I expanded with them. Not as an employee, not as a consultant, but as something else entirely. A safeguard. I never went back to Helios. There was nothing left to return to. One evening, I stood by the window in my new office. Top floor. City lights stretching endlessly below. Emily texted me. "First day of law classes went well." I smiled, typed back, "Read everything." She replied almost instantly, "I will." I looked out over the city again. Quiet, steady, controlled. They thought removing me would make them faster, more efficient, more modern. What they didn't understand was simple. You can remove the system. You can ignore the process. You can silence the warning. But you can't escape the consequences built into the foundation. And I didn't need revenge. I just needed patience. What would you have done if you were in my place? Would you have spoken up, risking being ignored, laughed at, or even pushed out sooner? Or would you have stayed silent, knowing the system would eventually expose the truth on its own? Is James a professional who simply followed the rules, or someone who let a disaster happen just to prove a point? And here's the real question. When a company collapses because it ignored the very safeguards meant to protect it, who is truly responsible? The one who built the system, or the ones who chose to ignore it? If you were James, would you warn them, or walk away and let them face the consequences? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to hear your side of the story. And if you enjoy powerful, real-world stories like this, don't forget to like and subscribe for more unforgettable stories coming your way.